This is AlJazeera.
Hello, I'm Sam Grant. This is a News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, now it's the White House's turn. President Donald Trump's legal team presents its defense in the next phase of the US impeachment trial. China's president says his country is facing a grave situation over the coronavirus outbreak and imposes more travel restrictions. Rescue workers in Turkey are searching for survivors after a powerful earthquake kills at least 22 people. The death of a young man in Libya highlights the harsh conditions of migrants held in detention camps.
And in sport, one of tennis's fiercest rivalries will have its latest instalment at the Australian Open. Home player Nick Kyrgios beating Karen Khachanov to set up a fourth-round match with Rafa Nadal.
Lawyers for US President Donald Trump are set to begin his defense at the Senate impeachment trial shortly. They'll have 3 days to counter Democratic arguments that he abused his power in dealing with Ukraine. Trump's accused of pressuring Kiev to investigate his rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, by withholding military aid. He's denied any wrongdoing. We'll go now to Heidi Jo Castro, who's standing by on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Let's start, Heidi, with what we can expect today. We know the line they're going to run, and they've said it throughout. This shouldn't even be happening. It doesn't warrant impeachment. This shouldn't even be before the Senate. That's what we'll be hearing today.
That is absolutely the crux of the argument, Stan, and we just heard a preview from some of the president's defenders speaking with the media moments ago, saying that the Democrats' case that was laid out over the last 3 days, calling it falsehoods, quote, sandwiched between hyperbole and conjecture. That is the aggressive line of attack we are expecting. Obviously, from the left, the reaction to those arguments from the impeachment managers, a very different response. We heard especially the closing arguments of Adam Schiff, the lead impeachment manager, described as commanding and compelling. But again, it really depends on who is responding and from which part of the political spectrum they fall. But further, not just attacking the Democrats in their line of defense of the president, from his team we also expect the airing of more favored right-wing theories. We saw some of this previewed yesterday by one of the president's attorneys, Jay Sekulow, saying that it was the Democrats, accusing the Democrats of being the ones that invited foreign election interference dating back to 2016 and that controversial Steele dossier. Expect a lot more of that as well. And of course, on the facts, Republicans say that Trump did not do anything wrong. They say that it was his regular authority and that he was trying to combat corruption in Ukraine when pressing its president to investigate the Bidens. And they say that these articles of impeachment, which allege abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, they say they are legally deficient. But I wanted to bring up one other big development, and this is from last night when there was an audio recording released by one of President Trump's, an associate of the attorney of President Trump, Lev Parnas, and he says that this is President Trump's voice from a meeting in 2018 ordering that Marie Yovanovitch, who was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine at the time, ordering her firing. Now, how does that all apply? Well, they say that because Trump got rid of Yovanovitch eventually, a year after that recording was made, that is part of his abuse of power scheme, that he got rid of her not for legitimate reasons, but perhaps part of this quid pro quo, which the Democrats are alleging, when he was hoping to get these political favors in return from the Ukrainian government.
Heidi, as you're speaking as well, we're just watching to the side of you there the images that are coming live. We will go there the moment that this hearing begins to get underway. We're listening to the prayers at the moment ahead of that hearing. So let me just ask you, there are moderate Republicans rather, and the Democrats were hoping that they may be able to sway them to, at the very least, vote for allowing more witnesses or more evidence to be brought. Is there any indication that they may have been swayed by the Democrats' position, or are we going to see this very much along partisan lines and that the Republicans will just fall into line behind Donald Trump?
Sure. Well, those 4 moderate Republicans, some 4 or 5 at this point, they've held their cards very close to their chest during the duration of those opening arguments from the Democrats. But we know that they have stated previous to the beginning of this trial that they were at least open to the idea of calling more witnesses upon the conclusion of these opening arguments from both sides. And ultimately, it doesn't matter so much how others are responding to these arguments, because they very much, as we said from the beginning, are staunchly on their sides and not open-minded. But those 4 in the middle, it's hard to say whether or not they have been swayed. Certainly, they've been pulled in one direction, or the Democrats have been trying to pull them in one direction over the course of the last 3 days when it was their turn to argue for the president's removal, really arguing for these moderate Republicans to be open to more witnesses, and now it'll be the president's team's turn to try to pull those moderates in the opposite direction.
Okay, Heidi, well, we've had the opening prayer, we've had the swearing in, and now we're about to listen to the beginning of the proceedings today. This is Trump's lawyers outlining their case. Let's have a listen.
Trial of the articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives against Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
The Majority Leader is recognized.
Colleagues, we should expect 2 to 3 hours of session today. We'll take a quick break if needed.
Pursuant to the provisions of Senate Resolution 483, the Counsel for the President have 24 hours to make the presentation of their case. The Senate will now hear you. The presiding officer recognizes Mr. Cipollone to begin presentation of the case for the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. Senators, Leader McConnell, Democratic Leader Schumer, thank you for your time and thank you for your attention. I want to start out just very briefly giving you a short plan for today. We're going to be very respectful of your time. As Leader McConnell said, we anticipate going about 2 to 3 hours at most, and to be out of here by 1 o'clock at the latest. We're going to focus today on 2 points. You heard the House manager speak for nearly 24 hours over 3 days. We don't anticipate using that much time. We don't believe that they have come anywhere close to meeting their burden for what they're asking you to do. In fact, we believe that when you hear the facts, and that's what we intend to cover today, the facts, you will find that the President did absolutely nothing wrong. And what we intend to do today, and we'll have more presentations in greater detail on Monday, but what we intend to do today is go through their record that they established in the House. And we intend to show you some of the evidence that they adduced in the House that they decided over their 3 days and 24 hours that they didn't have enough time or made a decision not to show you. And every time you see one of these pieces of evidence, ask yourself, why didn't I see that in the first 3 days? They had it. It came out of their process. Why didn't they show that to the Senate? And I think that's an important question, because as House managers, really their goal should be to give you all of the facts, because they're asking you to do something very, very consequential, and I would submit to you, to use a word that Mr. Schiff used a lot, very, very dangerous. And that's the second point that I'd ask you to keep in mind today. They're asking you not only to overturn the results of the last election, but as I've said before, they're asking you to remove President Trump from the ballot in an election that's occurring in approximately 9 months. They're asking you to tear up all of the ballots across this country on your own initiative take that decision away from the American people. And I don't think they spent 1 minute of their 24 hours talking to you about the consequences of that for our country. Not 1 minute. They didn't tell you what that would mean for our country today, this year, and forever into our future. They're asking you to do something that no Senate has ever done. And they're asking you to do it with no evidence. And that's wrong, and I ask you to keep that in mind. I ask you to keep that in mind. So what I would do is point out one piece of evidence for you, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and they will walk you through their record, and they will show you things that they didn't show you. Now, they didn't talk a lot about the transcript of the call, which I would submit is the best evidence of what happened on the call. And they said things over and over again that are simply not true. One of them was, there's no evidence of President Trump's interest in burden sharing. That wasn't the real reason. But they didn't tell you that burden sharing was discussed in the call, in the transcript of the call. They didn't tell you that. Why? Let me read it to you. Here's the president, and we'll go through the entire transcript. I'm not going to read the whole transcript. We'll make it available. I'm sure you have it, but we'll make available copies of the transcript so you can have it. The president said, and they read this line, I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine. We spend a lot of effort and a lot of time. But they stopped there. They didn't read the following. Much more than European countries are doing. And they should be helping you more than they are. Germany does almost nothing for you. All they do is talk. And I think it's something that you should really ask them about. When I was speaking to Angela Merkel, she talks Ukraine, but she doesn't do anything. A lot of European countries are the same way. So I think it's something you want to look at, but the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. That's where they picked up again with the quote. But they left out the entire discussion of burden sharing. Now, what does President Zelensky say? Does he disagree? No, he agrees. They didn't tell you this. Didn't tell you this. Didn't have time in 24 hours to tell you this. Yes, you are absolutely right. Not only 100%, but actually 100%. And I can tell you the following. I did talk to Angela Merkel, and I did meet with her. And I also met and talked with Macron. And I told them that they are not doing quite as much as they need to be doing on the issues with the sanctions. They are not enforcing the sanctions. They are not working as much as they should work for Ukraine. It turns out that even though logically the European Union should be our biggest partner, but technically the United States is a much bigger partner than the European Union. And I'm very grateful to you for that, because the United States is doing quite a lot for Ukraine. Much more than the European Union, especially when we are talking about sanctions against the Russian Federation. Okay. You heard a lot about the importance of confronting Russia, and we're going to talk about that. And you will hear that President Trump has a strong record on confronting Russia. You will hear that President Trump has a strong record of support for Ukraine. You will hear that from the witnesses in their record that they didn't tell you about. So that's one very important example. They come here to the Senate and they ask you, remove a president, tear up the ballots in all of your states, and they don't bother to read the key evidence of the discussion of burden sharing that's in the call itself. Now that's emblematic of their entire presentation. I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Mike Propura. He's going to walk you through many more examples of this. And with each example, ask yourself, why am I just hearing about this now, after 24 hours of sitting through arguments? Why? And the reason is, we can talk about the process, we will talk about the law, but today, we are going to confront them on the merits of their argument. Now, they have the burden of proof. And they have not come close to meeting it. In fact, and I want to ask you to think about one issue regarding process, beyond process. If you were really interested in finding out the truth, why would you run a process the way they ran? If you were really confident in your position on the facts, why would you lock everybody out of it from the president's side? Why would you do that? We will talk about the process arguments, but the process arguments also are compelling evidence on the merits, because it's evidence that they themselves don't believe in the facts of their case. And the fact that they came here for 24 hours and hid evidence from you is further evidence that they don't really believe in the facts of their case. That this is, for all their talk about election interference, that they're here to perpetrate the most massive interference in an election in American history, and we can't allow that to happen. It would violate our Constitution. It would violate our history. It would violate our obligations to the future. And most importantly, it would violate the sacred trust that the American people have placed in you and have placed in them. The American people decide elections. They have one coming up in 9 months. So we will be very efficient. We will begin our presentation today. We will show you a lot of evidence that they should have showed you. And we will finish efficiently and quickly so that we can all go have an election. Thank you, and I yield to my colleague, Michael Propura.
Mr. Chief Justice, members of the Senate, good morning. Again, my name is Michael Propura. I serve as Deputy Counsel to the President. It is my honor and privilege to appear before you today on behalf of President Donald J. Trump.
And what is the President's response? Well, it reads like a classic organized crime shakedown. Shorn of its rambling character and in not so many words, this is the essence of what the President communicates. We've been very good to your country, very good. No other country has done as much as we have. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. On this and on that, I'm going to put you in touch with people, not just any people. I'm going to put you in touch with Attorney General of the United States, my Attorney General, Bill Barr. He's got the whole weight of the American law enforcement behind him. And I'm going to put you in touch with Rudy. You're going to love him, trust me. You know what I'm asking, and so I'm only going to say this a few more times, in a few more ways. And by the way, don't call me again. I'll call you when you've done what I asked. This is, in sum and character, what the President was trying to communicate.
That's fake. That's not the real call. That's not the evidence here. That's not the transcript that Mr. Cipollone just referenced. And we can shrug it off and say we were making light or a joke. But that was in a hearing in the United States House of Representatives discussing the removal of the President of the United States from office. There are very few things, if any, that can be as grave and as serious. Let's stick with the evidence. Let's talk about the facts and the evidence in this case. The most important piece of evidence we have in the case, and before you, is the one that we began with nearly 4 months ago, the actual transcript of the July 25, 2019 telephone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. The real transcript. If that were the only evidence we had, it would be enough to show that the Democrats' entire theory is completely unfounded. But the transcript is far from the only evidence demonstrating that the President did nothing wrong. Once you sweep away all of the bluster and innuendo, the selective leaks, the closed-door examinations of the Democrats' hand-picked witnesses, the staged public hearings, what we're left with are 6 key facts that have not and will not change. First, the transcript shows that the President did not condition either security assistance or a meeting on anything. The paused security assistance funds aren't even mentioned on the call. Second, President Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials have repeatedly said that there was no quid pro quo and no pressure on them to review anything. Third, President Zelensky and high-ranking Ukrainian officials did not even know the security assistance was paused until the end of August, over a month after the July 25 call. Fourth, not a single witness testified that the President himself said that there was any connection between any investigations and security assistance, a presidential meeting, or anything else. Fifth, the security assistance flowed on September 11, and a presidential meeting took place on September 25, without the Ukrainian government announcing any investigations. Finally, the Democrats' blind drive to impeach the President does not and cannot change the fact, as attested to by the Democrats' own witnesses, that President Trump has been a better friend and stronger supporter of Ukraine than his predecessor. Those are the facts. We plan to address some of them today and some of them next week. Each one of these 6 facts, standing alone, is enough to sink the Democrats' case. Combined, they establish what we've known since the beginning. The President did absolutely nothing wrong. The Democrats' allegation that the President engaged in a quid pro quo is unfounded and contrary to the facts. The truth is simple, and it's right before our eyes. The President was at all times acting in our national interest and pursuant to his oath of office. But before I dive in and speak further about the facts, let me mention something that my colleagues will discuss in greater detail. The facts that I'm about to discuss today are the Democrats' facts. This is important because the House manager spoke to you for a very long time, over 21 hours, and have repeatedly claimed to you that their case is